Grand Admiral Thrawn was born a nobody and rose to become the galaxy's greatest threat. But how? Here's the whole story behind the latest big bad in the Star Wars franchise. Though Thrawn was introduced in Timothy Zahn's now non-canonical 1991 novel Heir to the Empire, fans learned more about the character's origin story in Zahn's 2017 canonical reboot, Thrawn, as well as the Thrawn Ascendance trilogy, which was released between 2020 and 2021.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
The man later known as Thrawn was originally named Kivu Ranuru, or Vuran. The son of the lower-class Kivu family and a member of the Chiss race, he was born on the planet Rentor around 59 years before the Battle of Yavin. For reference, this is about the same time that Qui-Gon Jinn became a Jedi Knight and just a few years before the birth of Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Chiss are biologically similar to humans, except for their distinctive blue skin and striking red eyes. These mutations may have developed after their region of space was all but cut off from the rest of the galaxy many thousands of years ago. The Chiss rule over a portion of the unknown regions, an area beyond the Outer Rim that has long been considered mysterious and treacherous due to the highly unusual cosmic phenomena that occur there. The Chiss navigate the unknown regions with the help of temporarily Force-sensitive Chiss children called Skywalkers. Kivu Ranuru's older sister was one of these Skywalkers. The siblings were separated early in their childhood, which had a profound effect on Vuran. The hyper-intelligent Vuran made a name for himself at the Academy on Rentor. Though he hailed from humble beginnings, his performance attracted the attention of powerful Chiss leaders, including Mithra Kiord, the head of the powerful Myth family. In 39 BBY, Vuran was formally accepted into the Myth family as a merit adoptive, which essentially means that the Myths took in Vuran based solely on his potential. This involved a process known as rematching, which included a ceremony and a change of name, during which Kivu Ranuru became Myth Ranuru. This also meant that promising student Thrawn would be expected to serve the Chiss Ascendancy in a more important capacity. He was transferred from Rentor to the Taharim Academy on the planet Naparar, where cadets trained to prepare for service in the newly formed Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet. The journey marked the first time Thrawn had ever flown in space, but it would hardly be the last. From approximately 37 BBY to 19 BBY, Thrawn rose within the ranks of the Chiss military. During these years, he cemented his reputation as a leader who would take risks if it might mean victory, and this included going on the offensive. Since preemptive strikes went against the Chiss honor code, Thrawn's command style became a strength and a liability to the Ascendancy. It wasn't long before he was promoted again, this time to senior captain, and given a new honorific suffix, making him Mithra Nuru Odo. Thrawn first meets a character from the live-action Star Wars universe in the 2018 book Thrawn Alliances.
This is where the fun begins.
With the Clone Wars already well underway, Padmé Amidala and her handmaiden Duja travel to Batuu on a secret mission. When her husband, Anakin Skywalker, learns that her ship has been found empty, he goes looking for her. Along the way, he crosses paths with Thrawn. Thrawn, who was ever hungry to gather intelligence that might help in the Chiss Ascendancy's war against the alien Grisk, makes a deal with the Jedi. He'll help Anakin find Padmé if Anakin will debrief him on the intricacies of the Clone Wars. The unlikely duo is soon ambushed at Black Spire Outpost, and Thrawn determines that separatists are plotting to assassinate Anakin. Meanwhile, Duja is murdered when she discovers an enemy droid factory and base. Thrawn and Anakin investigate, get themselves captured, free themselves, and eventually meet up with Padmé. Ultimately, though, it becomes clear that Thrawn and Anakin have different goals. The Chiss want to steal a deflective shield generator, while the Republic wants to blow up the factory. Anakin takes things one step too far and bombs a mine too, which Thrawn and Padmé deem a serious diplomatic error. Nevertheless, Thrawn and Anakin part on friendly terms, and their time together on Batuu pays dividends for Thrawn later in his life. Thrawn's personal philosophy may have been riskier and more aggressive than most Chiss, but on the whole, he favored careful planning over reckless violence. These two facets of his personality set Thrawn up for the mission that would change the course of his life. As he continues to wage war on the Grisk, Thrawn meets some Nemoidians who have survived the Clone Wars. They propose the Chiss fight the newly formed Galactic Empire alongside the remnants of the Trade Federation. Sensing that Emperor Palpatine might turn out to be a better ally than the Nemoidians, Thrawn hatches a plan. In the 2018 comic Star Wars Thrawn No. 1, the Chiss captain arranges to have himself stripped of his title and exiled to wild space. His intention is to be found by Imperial forces, gain their trust, and infiltrate their ranks, all for his people's benefit. After a few months, in 15 BBY, Thrawn attacks an Imperial scouting party and allows himself to be captured and questioned. He is quite honest about the preemptive strike that led to his supposed banishment, but lies about having lived at his encampment for 5 years. After impressing his captors, Thrawn is taken by Captain Park and Cadet Vanto to Coruscant to be presented as a gift to Emperor Palpatine. Thrawn quickly offers himself to the Empire as a resource knowledgeable about the unknown regions. Palpatine accepts and welcomes Thrawn into the Imperial Navy. For a while, Thrawn sees himself as a double agent and assumes he will spend about a year in the Empire's service, but that's not exactly what happens. Though he served as a formidable Chiss strategist with decades of experience under his belt, Thrawn is sent to the Royal Imperial Academy for about 3 months. He forms an instant rapport with Emperor Palpatine, who is curious about the unknown regions and shares Thrawn's appreciation for fine things in life. But within both the Academy and the ranks of the Empire's Navy, Thrawn is not as well liked. He endures a significant amount of harassment, mostly due to his alien appearance, but also partly because of his smug attitude. For the second time in his life, Thrawn graduates as a lieutenant, and Vanto is assigned to act as his aide. It isn't long before Thrawn is back to his old habits, displaying the kind of ambitious aggression that had long irritated his Chiss overseers. Despite irking his Imperial superiors as well, Thrawn almost always comes out on top. In just a few short years, Thrawn is promoted from lieutenant to captain to first officer to commander, serving on the ships Bloodcrow and Thunder Wasp. But as he outshines his superiors, he creates adversaries too. To help himself politically, he makes frequent visits to Coruscant where he ingratiates himself with the Empire's movers and shakers, including Wolf Yularen and Orinda Pryce. Because Thrawn's story exists in so many forms, it can be tricky to pin down exactly when certain events took place, especially if dates aren't specifically mentioned in the texts or TV shows. Based on context clues, however, we can guess that Thrawn was given control of the Chimaera around 12 BBY. After about 4 years of service, Thrawn and Vanto are called back to Coruscant without explanation. For once, Thrawn finds himself honored instead of reprimanded or scrutinized. He's made Commodore and given the run of a Star Destroyer. The ISD Chimaera, upon which he emblazons his personal symbol, becomes his ship from then on. Thrawn's closest associates benefit from his rapid ascension too. Vanto is promoted to Lieutenant Commander, and Orinda Pryce is named the new governor of her home planet, Lothal. At this time, Commodore Thrawn is also introduced to Grand Moff Tarkin.
Charming to the last.
Commodore Thrawn and his crew aboard the Chimaera are quickly tasked with sussing out a burgeoning rebel insurgency. One of their leaders, who goes by the codename Nightswan, has long been a thorn in Thrawn's side. Thrawn is promoted from Commodore to Admiral after crushing a rebellion on Bottajef. He then receives his final promotion after figuring out the identity of Nightswan and putting a stop to another revolt. And, in true Thrawn fashion, he does it all while disrespecting his high command. The Empire discovers a rebel movement spreading across planets, such as Bataan and Lothal. Thrawn is initially placed in charge of crushing an insurgency on Bataan, but he turns down the job because he doesn't feel there is enough intelligence to ensure victory. He's right, too. However, as the insurgents fly to their mobile base, Thrawn follows. There, he arranges for Vanto to be captured. As Thrawn predicts, Vanto is brought before their leader, Neville Signy, or Nightswan. The Chimaera returns to Bataan and threatens the insurgents. Signy and Thrawn meet to negotiate and realize they have much in common, including their preference to minimize loss of life in battle. Thrawn even reveals to Signy that he is still loyal to the Chiss and not necessarily the Empire, and attempts to lure him to his personal cause. In the end, however, an explosion on Bataan set off by Governor Pryce kills countless civilians, including Signy. Though the bomb wasn't his doing, the strategy leading up to it was, and Thrawn reaps the reward. Thrawn is invited to appear before the Emperor, who names him Grand Admiral. The Imperial Navy may have silenced the rebellion on Bataan, but Lothal still poses a serious problem. It's at this point that non-book and non-comic readers will meet the Grand Admiral, as he's sent to deal with the freedom fighters of Star Wars Rebels. At the beginning of the 3rd season, Thrawn steps in to hunt down Phoenix Squadron and secure the region for the Empire. For 2 seasons, he uses his intellect as a strategist and his affinity for art and culture to match wits with the rebels, and in particular, the crew of the Ghost. Thrawn connects dots in several ways to put together a better picture of the insurgency he faces. For example, he is able to keep tabs on them thanks to Sabine Wren's graffiti, and he tricks Hera Syndulla with his knowledge of Twi'lek totems. Even when he loses, he wins. After the rebels successfully bomb a Star Destroyer, Thrawn takes a few steps closer to uncovering the location of their hidden base.
The rebels have won this battle, but the war will be ours.
Thrawn also identifies a traitor in the Empire's ranks. Agent Alexander Kallus had been turned toward the rebel cause, aiding them under the codename Fulcrum. Kallus would eventually escape his grasp, but this revelation leads to the discovery of the rebel base on Atollon, which is soon followed by a decisive Imperial victory there. Some of the most recent Star Wars stories revolve around one fateful decision that Ezra Bridger makes in the series finale of Star Wars Rebels. When Governor Pryce destroyed the fuel station on Lothal and killed Jedi Kanan Jarrus, she also weakened the Empire's position on the planet. With the battle at something of a stalemate and the fate of Lothal hanging in the balance, Ezra puts his plan into action. He surrenders to Thrawn, who brings him aboard the Chimaera. The Grand Admiral thinks he finally has the upper hand as he tells Ezra that he doesn't really want to lay waste to the planet. After a brief interlude with Emperor Palpatine, Ezra manages to corner Thrawn on the bridge of the Chimaera. And it's then that Captain Pellaeon radios to report that Imperial ships are being destroyed, and that something has materialized from hyperspace. Ezra had summoned Purrgil, enormous spacefaring creatures that resemble a cross between a whale and a giant squid. When they arrive, he uses the Force to compel them to attack the Chimaera. As one wraps its tentacles around the Grand Admiral himself, Thrawn realizes he has been defeated. With the ship and its inhabitants in their grasp, the Purrgil disappear into hyperspace.
Was that the plan?
Curiously, during the assault on Atollon months earlier, Thrawn had taunted an injured Bendu who foresaw his demise.
I see your defeat, like many arms surrounding you in a cold embrace.
After Thrawn and Ezra go missing, the Empire turns its attention away from the TIE Defender program the Grand Admiral had been spearheading on Lothal. The Emperor, Grand Moff Tarkin, and Darth Vader fully commit to Project Stardust and decide they must stamp out the Rebel Alliance once and for all. You probably know what happens over the next 4 to 5 years of the Star Wars timeline. The Rebel Alliance launches a desperate mission to steal the Death Star plans, followed by Jedi-in-training Luke Skywalker landing the blow that destroys the deadly space station. The Empire strikes back, the Rebels make a final stand over Endor, and Luke helps his father see the error of his ways. By the end of Return of the Jedi, the second Death Star has been destroyed, marking the dawn of a new era in galactic history. Here's a question though. Would all this have turned out differently if Thrawn hadn't been spirited away from the skies above Lothal? His reputation and track record suggest so. Had he been present during the heist on Scarif, he may have been able to halt the domino effect that led to the Empire's collapse. Had he been by the Emperor's side, he may have cautioned against the construction of a second Death Star, as he was always skeptical about placing the majority of the Empire's resources into one project. His disappearance also makes a potential alliance with the Chiss less likely, if not entirely impossible. The fact that Thrawn was taken off the board during the final years of the Galactic Civil War no doubt gave the rebels a much better chance at success. Before he died, Palpatine constructed a secret observatory and computer lab on Jakku, which housed his contingency plan. That plan called for Imperial forces to flee to the unknown regions along a path he'd personally charted. The so-called contingency becomes necessary when, in 5 ABY, the New Republic wins a months-long battle on Jakku, after which the Empire concedes and the Galactic Civil War comes to an end. As we see in The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, many of those who'd only half-heartedly supported the Emperor switch sides once he is gone. Or supposedly gone at least. But we're not there just yet. Others, still loyal to the Empire, hide in cells across the known galaxy, ready to rise up when called upon. Meanwhile, many of the highest-ranking members, including the Hux family, flee to the unknown regions using Palpatine's directions. The Imperial Remnant begins to rebuild there on planets such as Ilum, which will later be transformed into Starkiller Base. Much of the sequel trilogy takes place in the unknown regions precisely because the First Order, which emerged from the Imperial Remnant, gained power as it came to understand and control this once mysterious sector of space. At the same time, the New Republic begins to form its government. They get a good few years out of it too, before everything gets a bit explodey. Thrawn's story picks up once more in The Mandalorian, which is set in approximately 9 ABY. In Chapter 13, Ahsoka Tano tracks down the villainous Morgan Elsbeth to elicit information about Thrawn's whereabouts. When she appears in The Mandalorian, Morgan is acting as the magistrate of Corvus, but she is clearly already allied with Thrawn at this point. Notably, her droids are marked with Chimaera symbols. Though Moff Gideon is that series' chief antagonist, The Mandalorian begins to suggest that a greater threat to the New Republic is looming somewhere off-screen. Confirmation comes in the form of Captain Pellaeon and the Shadow Council, who appear as holograms in Chapter 23. The Shadow Council comes together after the fall of the Empire with two goals in mind: bring the various factions loyal to the Empire together and conceal the fact that a threat to the New Republic exists at all. Moff Gideon calls them to order to request backup as he's about to defend his forge on Mandalore from the recently united clans. He snidely points out that Grand Admiral Thrawn is conspicuously absent from their meeting, as usual, and wonders aloud whether it's time for new leadership. Captain Pellaeon, who served under Thrawn during his time fighting Phoenix Squadron, reminds him,
"Our one hope for success relies upon the secrecy of his return."
This strongly implies that either Pellaeon is in contact with the Grand Admiral, or that he has reason to believe Thrawn is alive and will re-emerge to lead the fractured Empire. Morgan Elsbeth and Ahsoka Tano also hold out hope that the Chimaera and its crew might be found. The efforts to find them serve as the main plot of the Disney Plus series Ahsoka. We learn that Morgan is a member of the Night Sisters, an order of force-wielding women sometimes referred to as the Witches of Dathomir. Ahsoka steals the supposed star map that leads to Thrawn, and, by extension, Ezra. Morgan steals it back, and she, Baylan Skoll, and his apprentice, Shin Hati, all travel to an ancient ruin on Cetos. With the map in its proper place, Morgan believes she can hear Thrawn's call across time and space. The massive hyperspace ring she has built, known as the Eye of Sion, is intended to allow her to reach Peridia, a planet located in an entirely separate galaxy from the one seen in the Star Wars franchise. With her ship grounded, Ahsoka considers destroying the map to prevent the return of the presumed heir to the Empire. Sabine can't bring herself to do it, however, as the map's destruction would also leave Ezra stranded forever. After Ahsoka is defeated by Baylan, Sabine gives up the map, surrenders, and joins the villains on a journey beyond the galaxy. The mystery surrounding Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra Bridger's fate is resolved in Part 6 of Ahsoka, titled Far, Far Away. That the two characters survived their intergalactic journey was never really in doubt. The details, however, were still up in the air, at least until the Eye of Sion transports Morgan Elsbeth, Baylan Skoll, Shin Hati, and a captive Sabine Wren to their exact location. As the show had heavily foreshadowed, Thrawn is indeed living on Peridia, and he has been there for more than 10 years. He still has his ship, the Chimaera, though it's looking a little worse for wear. And he still has an army of stormtroopers at his command, who are more loyal to him than ever.
All will honor to make the sacrifice. For you.
You might have noticed that, without a way to replace their broken parts and armor, Thrawn's forces have taken to using a method of repair that greatly resembles the Japanese practice of kintsugi, the use of gold to repair that famously draws attention to the beauty found in imperfection. During his time in exile, Thrawn makes judicious use of Peridia's Night Sisters. These magic-wielding witches have allied themselves with the Grand Admiral, and their powers likely helped him survive on Peridia. At the very least, he needed their help communicating with his home galaxy. Notably, their siren calls to Morgan Elsbeth, and possibly Captain Pellaeon, acted as the first step in Thrawn's master plan. For their part, the Night Sisters plan to return to their homeworld in Thrawn's galaxy, Dathomir. When Ahsoka Tano follows Morgan Elsbeth to Peridia in the mouth of a Purrgil, Thrawn doesn't panic, but he doesn't underestimate her either. Nor does he take too seriously or too lightly the threat posed by a reunited Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra. First, he sends Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati after them, but to no avail. Twice, he sends a limited number of fighters and troops to deal with them. But as he explains to Morgan Elsbeth and the Night Sisters, it doesn't matter if they're killed or left behind. All the Grand Admiral has to do is keep these Jedi occupied long enough that they won't be able to board the ship and stop its launch. When Ahsoka gets a little too close for comfort, Thrawn sends Morgan to take care of her. This sets up a rematch of the duel between Ahsoka and Morgan. Though Ezra does manage to get on board the Chimaera, Sabine stays behind to fight alongside Ahsoka, who slays Morgan but fails to prevent Thrawn's departure. The last we see of him in Season 1 of Ahsoka, Thrawn is making the hyperspace jump back to his own galaxy with a mysterious cargo in hand. Meanwhile, Ezra makes his escape to rendezvous with Hera Syndulla, whose worst fear has just come true. As she'd long tried to warn Mon Mothma and the New Republic, Grand Admiral Thrawn has returned.
Long live the Empire.
In recent years, Thrawn's story has evolved to intersect with Anakin Skywalker, the crew of the Ghost, and the casts of both The Mandalorian and Ahsoka. But the character dates back to the time before the prequel trilogy, let alone a sequel trilogy or television series. Timothy Zahn's original trilogy of Thrawn novels, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command, tells a complete tale depicting the battle between Grand Admiral Thrawn and George Lucas's original trio of heroes, who appear as older versions of themselves. Interestingly, these books take place in 9 ABY as well, and though they're not canon, they involve several recognizable characters, subplots, and themes. In Zahn's series, Grand Admiral Thrawn and Captain Pellaeon are interested in the late Emperor's cloning operation. Han Solo and Leia Organa are married at this point, and Leia has continued to show promise in the Force, like her brother. Meanwhile, the Grand Admiral cooperates and then clashes with a Dark Jedi named Joruus C'baoth. In some ways, their relationship resembles the struggle for power between General Hux and Kylo Ren. The books also feature the Salamiri, lizard-like creatures that can repel the Force and who briefly appear as sculptures in Star Wars Rebels. But differences abound in the Star Wars Expanded Universe too. Han and Leia go on to have 3 children instead of 1. Luke and Force-sensitive smuggler-turned-Jedi Mara Jade marry before having a son named Ben. The most significant difference, however, is Thrawn's eventual fate. Of course, we don't know what will become of the canonical Grand Admiral Thrawn just yet. He's such an integral part of the franchise at the moment, not to mention one of the most capable villains Star Wars has ever had, so it seems almost certain that he'll at least survive until Dave Filoni's New Republic-era movie hits theaters. It is worth mentioning that Thrawn doesn't factor into the sequel trilogy, so he'll likely be taken out of the picture sometime before 34 ABY. But the Thrawn of Legends has already met his end. In The Last Command, Grand Admiral Thrawn is betrayed and murdered by his personal bodyguard, the Nogri named Rook, the same character who dies during the attack on Lothal in Star Wars Rebels. Rook had recently learned that the Empire wasn't helping but hurting his people. The Nogri practically worshipped Darth Vader, who had promised to restore their badly polluted ecosystem in exchange for their allegiance to the Empire. But neither the Empire nor the Imperial Remnant ever made good on that promise, which Leia reveals during the events of the original Thrawn trilogy. The Nogri blames Thrawn and not the deceased Vader and begins to place his trust in Leia. While an unsuspecting Thrawn sits in his chair communicating with Captain Pellaeon, Rook stabs him in the back from behind. Grand Admiral Thrawn's last words are, "But it was so artistically done."